Hi everyone. In this series of screencasts, we're going to be having a look at building a fairly simple graphical user interface app. So we're going to build this red, green, blue color space color picker. So as you can see, here's a little example of a completed app. So there's these three bars that we call sliders. And by moving the little arrow along those, which you can do by dragging or just clicking, it changes the color that appears down the bottom. So this is working in the red, green, blue or RGB color space. And the way that that works within MATLAB is that each of the colors, red, green and blue, are scaled from 0 to 1. 0 would be none of that color is present in the final color, whereas 1 would be all of that color is present in the final color. To maybe make that a little bit more clear, I'll show you what I mean. So for example, if we turn red right down to 0, and blue right down to 0, and green right up to 1, we get this color that's just this very bright lime green. So it's all of the green, none of anything else. And then as we start to sort of introduce elements of the other colors, we start to see sort of different mixes. So it's pretty much just mixing of fundamental colors like you would with paint or something like that. So we're going to do this using AppDesigner today. If you've had previous experience with MATLAB, you might remember Guide. Guide was an old tool used for creating graphical user interfaces. We're now replacing it with AppDesigner. MATLAB's going to remove Guide sometime in the next few releases. So really important to learn AppDesigner now. So let's get started with AppDesigner, how to make one of these graphical user interfaces and then make this little app. So to launch AppDesigner, just go to the command window in MATLAB and type AppDesigner. And that'll launch a start page that has quite a few templates you can choose from. For us, none of these templates really work, so we're just going to use a blank app, and that will open up this blank grey canvas. So the canvas itself, you can just click on the corner or the edges to resize it however you want it to be. You can change the background color if you'd like. So, maybe you want to make it a little bit more grey in the background. You can play around with colors there. And there's a few other things that you can explore in terms of its properties. So that's all under this inspector bar on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have all of the components that are available for AppDesigner applications. So we've covered some of these in lectures, but you can explore them all here yourself as well. There's some really interesting ones that have been introduced with AppDesigner in terms of instrumentation down the bottom here. But today we're mostly going to be focusing on the more common ones at the top. So the first component that we're interested in today is what's called a slider. So sliders allow you to adjust a value within a particular range. And that's what we're going to use to choose the amount of red, green and blue that we're using. So with these sliders, it generates sort of an automatic scale of 0 to 100. That's the default. And it also has a label. So we actually want that. That label is helpful to us. So if I double click it, I can edit it. The other way I can edit it is by going over into the property inspector on the right, and you can see here that there's an option for label. Changing that will also change the label there. So another cool trick here is if I type in red, and if you watch where it currently says app.slider in the component browser, when I hit enter, or rather when I click away from it, it updates the name to app.redSlider. So it's given this component a descriptive name of red slider automatically. If you don't like the name, you can still change it by double clicking on that component's name. But I think red slider is pretty descriptive, so I'm going to keep it as it is. Another thing I'll need to change here is the limits. As I mentioned, we are using a scale of 0 to 1. That's how MATLAB interprets RGB color space. So you can see that there's a limits property in the property inspector. You can just change that to 0 to 1. Now it's produced some fairly strange ticks to break up that bar from 0 to 1. Probably not too useful to us. So what we can do is we can go to the major ticks property and we can just use vector notation to replace that with perhaps a more useful scale. So we can try 0 to 1 in steps of 0.1, maybe even 0 to 1 in steps of 0.5. No, that looks a bit crowded. I think I'll do steps of 0.1. That looks pretty nice. So now you can repeat that process by clicking over in the components toolbox and drawing the next two sliders as well. Or you can cheat and just copy and paste the one we've already made the way that we want it. So if you copy and paste it, you can, which you can do using right click, or you can Control C, Control V, then it's already in the same format. We can again change the label, and when I change this to green, if you watch the component browser on the right, it again updates the name of that slider automatically to green slider. So again, gives it a useful description automatically, which is a really nice improvement over the previous guide tool. And then I'll do the same thing with the blue, and you can see that that's automatically been named blue slider on the right as well. So now we've got 3 sliders. They do have other properties you can explore as well in terms of font, in terms of how you interact with them. There's lots of different things that you can change. If you wanted to be very specific about the vertical spacing or something like that, you could look at the position to adjust that, but I'm not going to be that fussy today. So I might shift this one up slightly and make some room for a panel down the bottom. And I'll put that panel in. So panel is underneath containers. So just click on that and again, drag it to the size you want it. And I'm going to try to center it. It automatically comes up with this little panel heading, which we probably don't want. 2 ways to get rid of that. You can either click on it and edit it under the title section in the property inspector on the right, or you can double click on it and just delete the text. And then when you click away or hit enter, that'll disappear. Panels also have background color properties. That's how we're going to change the color later on. So if you want to set some sort of initial color, maybe you want it to be hot pink when it launches, you can do that. And again, lots of other properties there in terms of interactivity, etc., that you can explore. So the last thing we need for now is a title. So we can create that using label. So we can draw where we want that to be. And we're probably going to want to make that stand out a little bit more. So again, we can double click or edit in the text property of the property inspector what we want it to say. So I'm going to call it RGB color picker. And then I'm going to use the property inspector to center that and to increase the font size so that it stands out a little bit more. So that's looking pretty good now. And if we run that, we'll save it as color picker. And we now have this interface that we can interact with. It doesn't do anything yet though. So in the videos to come, we're going to look at how to actually add some functionality to those sliders so that moving these along actually changes the color that appears in that panel down the bottom. So tune in for the next videos and we will look into all of that more shortly.